You are watching the Southwestern American Choral Directors Association Connections podcast. Please like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel for future content. All right, hello everybody. I'm here today joined by Dr. Gary Packwood. Dr. Packwood is our SWACDA 2026 Albuquerque 7 through 9 tenor bass honor choir clinician and conductor. So Gary, thank you for joining me.
Sure, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe first you can start off just by telling us a little bit about your musical background, your professional life, academic life, and any relevant details there you want to share.
Okay, keep me on track now because I'll ramble. It's
Okay.
a lot of stuff. Okay, so I'll just tell you when I was a kid. I have two older brothers, and my father was insistent that we all study piano as soon as we were 6 years old. So we had to study piano from 6 until we got to middle school. And once we were in middle school, we could either continue with piano, sing in the choir, or play in the band. But you had to do one. And so both of my older brothers played in the band. And I got to see that mess, it was Louisiana hot. And I was like, ugh, it was the old uniforms, not the ones they have now. But so it was really something that I was not drawn to. And I enjoyed the piano. And so I stuck with the piano for a while. And I really was interested in drawing is what I wanted to do. As a kid, I wanted a syndicated cartoon is what I wanted. That was my goal as a kid. But, we got bused to a new high school, which was better in a lot of ways. They had more offerings, so they had art. But when I got there, everything was filled. So there was choir. And so I had experience. I sang at church choir and I played piano and all this. So I joined the choir, and that's where it all changed. Judy Hicks, just kind of, you know how that happens. You get a high school choir director and they change your life. And so then I went on to study private voice. And I'll tell you a really quick story about my father. He would insist that we practice 30 minutes a day. That's what the teacher told him. And so I knew my father didn't know anything about music, or my mother. Like they liked it. They didn't sing very well or anything like that, or they didn't play an instrument, but there was something about the discipline of it that they wanted us to get. And I remember I hated to practice like every kid. And I would just kind of make up some things on piano, to fill the time up. And and he'd always sat back there in a recliner, and I would just make up these things. And there was a grandfather clock that sat over here, and I just watched that thing tick away. And when those 30 minutes were up, I was out, And so one day I came home from school, and it was the day of my piano lesson. And I said, Dad, we got to go. You got to take me to my piano lesson. And my dad said, you don't take piano. I said, what do you mean? I said, piano lesson now. He goes, Gary, you don't think I know real music from that foolishness you've been doing over there? I was like, what? I could not believe he was able to discern, but then again, I probably was really bad. And so that was it. No more piano for me. He's like, I'm not throwing my money away. And then I moved to a new high school, and after a couple of years there, I decided I wanted to be a music major. And my teacher said, you need to take piano. You need to take piano and voice if your parents let you. So I had to go back, hat in hand, and beg my father to allow me to study. And I did. So I went back, and he said, okay, you remember what happened last time? I said, no, I'm good. So I did that, and I went to Southeastern Louisiana University, did a bachelor's degree, moved to South Florida, where I taught kindergarten through 5th grade for 2 years, and 60 kids in a class. Now, I team taught, but there was still 60 of them, of us. And It was so much fun, though. I taught with a lady. It was Alice Turnbull at the time, but she was just wonderful. I learned, you go into these situations as a teacher and you've been taught all these theories about what's going to happen, and then all these other things happen. So she had 15 years behind her, and I was so glad. So she was very helpful in those couple of years. And then I moved to a high school in the county and was there for eight years. And then during that time, I was going to Florida Atlantic University in the evenings. You could go. They had a master's degree where you could go in the evenings I did it for 3.5 years. I did part-time, just taking whatever they offered. And toward the end of my time there, they asked me if I wanted to teach an ensemble. And I jumped at that. I was like, yeah, that'd be so cool. And so started conducting a men's and women's ensemble with another grad student. And I was like, this is so much fun. It was all the things you don't deal with in high school, and there are two sides to every coin, but, I was something new, and so after, a year of that, I said to my teacher, I want to do this full time. How do I do this? She said, oh, you have to get a doctorate. You really need to get a doctorate. You have to. I thought, oh my God, I have to go back to school. You got to be kidding me. And so I started looking for schools, and I went to LSU, which is, I'm from Baton Rouge. So after being gone 10 years, I moved back to Baton Rouge and did a doctorate with Sarah Lynn Baird and Ken Fulton at LSU. And that was just it was such a good time. It was such a good time. My graduate students that I had at Mississippi State and at Montevallo, I would, if they said they were going to get a doctorate, I would say, look, it's going to be the best time of your life. And it's the last time in your life that you get to just fully immerse yourself into that. So don't take it for granted or anything. So I always encourage them to everything else has to be second, but just give yourselves those 2 or 3 years to just immerse yourself in that. And I miss graduate school. I miss being a student at LSU. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I miss being a
Yeah.
graduate student too. Yeah, I had that dedicated time to just
Yeah.
dig into research and repertoire and score study and all that stuff that still very important today, but less time. Time is fleeting as you go along doing that. Yeah, well, great. Thank you for giving us a little bit about that backstory and kind of how you came up. That's awesome. You are our 7 through 9 tenor bass honor choir conductor.
Right.
So take me through a little bit about your preparation for honor choirs and how that might differ from directing, say, a regular choir, a school choir, a community choir, something like that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you too. Let me just say, I taught elementary school, as I mentioned, and then I went to high school. And when I left LSU, I went to the University of Montevallo, which is a small liberal arts school in Central Alabama. And I taught there for 8 years. And then I went to Mississippi State for 12. And so then I was home, and I was just full-time composing and playing with the dogs. And, a lot of people say, oh, I don't know what I can do. And I'm just like, it was such a wonderful 2 years. It really was. I had a great time it was just what the doctor ordered. And now I have taken a new position in Texas, and it was very last minute, like 2 days before everything started.
Right. You're at Estacado High School, is that right?
I'm at Estacado High School in Lubbock, Texas.
I know it well. Yeah. We'll
Oh,
talk later.
really? Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, I did all my observation there as a student teacher. Yeah.
Oh, man, I didn't know
I went
that.
to Texas Tech. Yeah, I went to Texas Tech and did all my student teacher observation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. Well, yeah, we have to talk. And so I do that, but I also I'm one of the 2 choral facilitators for the district. So I go out and assist mostly new teachers, and so it's just the good thing about it is that at my age now, I've seen it all, I've heard it all, and it'll get done. And nothing, it just kind of rolls off of you, when you get to this point. And so for me, it's been challenging because, the things that I have to do now, I hadn't done in 20 something years, 23 years. And so, and trying to understand the process and getting here late was not great either, because they did all the technical things, how to get into the computer and how to check this and how to check that. And I'm still wondering around going, how do you take attendance? So it's been that part has been, it remains a challenge, because I'm still trying to, I always feel like I'm playing catch up, and I am still doing honor choirs. As a matter of fact, your question, I just got back yesterday from the University of North Alabama. Yes, in Florence, where Ian Lepke is the choir director. And so he had asked me to come and do their high school honor choir. So for me, my experience with doing these honor choirs, you have to do as much research as you can on what has happened in the past. They usually give you a list. You know how this goes. They give you a list of the last 10 years or so and who conducted. And then I usually check YouTube to see if I can actually find a performance of it. And I always ask the coordinators, how'd it go? And it always went right. And, and everybody knew their music. And so, but if I know the person who conducted, then I call them and we'll have a very one-on-one private, never to leave that phone conversation about what it really was. And I have come to the, I operate on selecting music that I can teach in the time that I'm there. That has to be, and I tell young conductors, they'll say, I'm going to do my first sonic choir, and I was thinking about doing the Mozart Requiem. No, you're not. You weren't thinking about that. So if you can't, I always say, if you can't teach those 3-5 songs in that day and a half, then you really shouldn't. You need to look at your repertoire again, because even if it's an easy song, you can peel that thing back to bare bones and do something special with an easy song. As I don't like to say easy songs. There are no easy songs, as far as I'm concerned. That's, and I sort of prepare that way. And there are levels to that. For something like what I did this weekend, the music was fairly easy. Like if I could go back, I'd change 1 or 2 things. For all states, it depends on where you go. I've done Texas All State, and those kids actually could have done the concert on the first rehearsal. And they could have done the concert on the first rehearsal of the pieces they knew. I think I did the TTBB, so I think they had to learn 3 pieces. But the 4 that they came, prepared with, they were prepared. The good thing was I could still change things. They weren't, if I said, no, we're not going to do that, we're going to do something else. And they were right there with me. So that's a different thing, I think, in some states. And I use Texas as an example because that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, I came up in that system, and they are very flexible to work with you, coming prepared, but able to adapt on the fly. So yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And then there are places that you don't know, but you hear things. I won't name any states. I love all the states, but I went to do an all state once, and they did not know the music at all. So I said, I usually, you'll get an evening rehearsal, and generally I will divide that between 35, 45 minutes a piece, each song. Mostly I am mostly trying to see where they are in the learning process. And I've decided on some concepts in each piece that I want to teach, that I want them to transfer now. So that's what I spend that first rehearsal doing, and mostly trying to teach concepts. And so I went to this all state, and I was like, okay, take out whatever the piece was. And I said, You know, it was a cappella, but I asked the collaborative pianist to play with us, and I gave a downbeat, and he played, and no one through all 300 kids just looking, and I kept conducting the whole thing as if someone was singing, and it was 3 movements, and they just sat there.
Oh
When
no,
it was
yeah.
over, I stopped and I said, "Now we know our part. We know our part, you know." But I had to. So I'm just, trying to show you the range of that, and that varies even with. I did an elementary Ball State in Oregon, which was one day. We started at 9 a.m. and it went to 9 p.m. And I thought, these kids will never make it. And they were so organized. They had all these breaks, and I was in awe of the teachers and the organization, that the kids were perfect. The kids they weren't complaining about being tired and all these things. And so my best advice is just choose things um, that you can teach. And of course, you've got all those. We now have to be more, I think, this is, I'm sure there'll be people who will say, no, you don't. But at least I try to be a little more diligent about the music, the message, making sure that it really does, that it's really different. And I've always sort of been that way. I love hearing novices come up after a concert and say, there was something for everyone. And, I'm like, oh, good. That's a great compliment when they say there was something for everyone. So I try to, include things that work well. I really like programming pieces that are ataka, that move straight. I don't talk during concert. I have friends who talk to it because I believe that, when you start, it's an experience all the way, to the end. And so I try to group pieces as much as I can. And sometimes it requires, your accompanist to be able to do some things that aren't on the score to get us to where we need to be, because I couldn't figure out a key, all these kind of little things. You change the key of something to make sure it fits and all of that. So, like I said, my biggest advice, though, is just make sure you choose something you can teach in that time.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll pull up the repertoire list here in just a minute, and you can maybe comment on it. We, yeah, we know that all of our directors in the Southwestern region are going to send audition singers, those that make the choir, fully prepared and ready to work with you, and use your story as kind of a cautionary tale, so that they all come ready to work and can get past initial concepts to deep music making with you. So yeah, we appreciate that.
Well, I'll tell you, Jeff, this is the second time I've come in. This is the second time. I actually came in 2020, the year of COVID. It was in Little Rock, I believe.
Oh,
And
right. Mm-hmm.
we were, it was early though in the year. So we weren't affected by the shutdown. I was actually in Northwest when we were affected, when we had to shut down the conference. They had to shut
Yeah,
down.
well, we barely
Uh-huh.
squeaked in
That's right.
before everything
That's
shut
right.
down. Yeah.
And so I've seen, I've kind of seen that area, that level at that time. But nowadays, you don't know because of the repercussions of COVID, which are real. But and I believe that I teach high school again, so they're real. However, we still have to keep pushing that expectation, to get them, because these, they just, we're giving them enough grace now. Let's eat.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, time to
yeah,
work again. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let me pull this up and see if everybody can see this. This is the full list of all the honor choirs, but right here in this blue with
Mm-hmm.
the tenor bass honor choir, we have your selections that you've made for
Mm-hmm.
this choir. Is there anything here that stands out that you'd like to tell
Okay.
the listeners and get them excited about, so that their students can also be excited about?
Well, I, um, I'm excited about the whole thing.
Of
And
course, yeah, of course, yeah.
I, I asked about an accompanist who I knew, and I think she's going to be there. She worked with me at Mississippi State. She's now in Tennessee. And she just, we always say, we never say we're doing a concert, we're going to put on a show. And so working with her and, she's singing the music, we've already started to try to pair this thing how we want it. And that'll be the reason for the last piece, the piece is Horizon that I wrote, because I wanted to introduce that idea of what does it mean, the horizon, what does it set forth? It sets something new. We always know that it's always something new, but the old is not forgotten. It's still very fresh in our mind. And so I wrote this little piece that I hope sort of sets that tone. And then I've always loved A Lovely Day. And that's Gibson, I believe. He arranged that. I'm hoping that we will go straight into that little piece. And there are other little surprises I'm hoping to have in between some of these pieces. And that'll just sort of depend on where we are when we get there, because the more I talk to Christy Lee, who will hopefully, I think she's going to play for me. Last time I spoke to her, I think we were all set. Each of these pieces, we have sort of tried to build upon the idea of what's new, what's old, and that which has yet to be seen, that has yet to be revealed. So I don't think there's one piece necessarily. I tried to, just weave them in and out. And I honestly, like I said, we're still developing the idea. I've done all kinds of things, Jeff. I've done parts of a piece and we went into something else. And then later on, we came back to a piece that we had, I've taken those liberties, musical instincts, so to say. And I've been told that by many fine conductors to follow your musical instincts. And it took me a long time to get to that point that I didn't, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I should do that. And every composer I asked, they're like, yeah, of course, that'd be great, And so I started doing that like maybe the last 4 or 5 years. And it was, for me, it was artistically challenging and really satisfying to me as an artist and to the students, because it was never just what they saw in front of them. They had to learn what they saw, but then all these other little artistic, creative things that I think we've sort of lost along the way, not just in choral music, but being creative as a people. And it's our fault. We as teachers, we beat it. We beat the creativity out of it. We do, and it's something that I don't want to be that teacher. I'll work with a choir and I'll ask a question and nobody will answer. And after a while, I have to say, I actually want you to answer me. I want an answer. At least I know you're thinking, and there's no right or wrong. Just contribute.
Right. I did an honor choir recently where I just said, yeah, I need the affirmation, folks, just as much as you need me to talk to you. I need you to talk to me.
Yeah, but and I don't think it's. The whole idea of music and the right and wrong. The older I get, the less right and wrong matters, so to speak. Right and wrong. Who decided right and wrong? So I just believe that it's their concert. It's not my concert. I tell choir, this is your choir. I sang in great choirs. This is what I tell them. I said, my choirs that I sang in were great, but if I'm standing in front of you as a conductor, this is your choir. So what do you want to do? And I would rather them, do something artistic and different than to wait for me to say, now do this, cut off here, do something. And Dr. Fulton was really big on that idea of following your instincts. And then I had a conversation with Eve Ely, who came to Mississippi State, and he said the same words to me. And several other people who had come and conveyed those type of things. And then I started to study orchestral conductors, like to modern day, and man, do they've got it figured out. They've got the artistic part figured out, and the technical part, of course, but they don't allow the technical part to overshadow. If anything, as far as concerned, a conversation should be had about it being the other way around. How much time do we spend in undergrad teaching them artistic decisions? Very little. We teach them the 4 pattern forever.
Right. And
we really should be able to do that much quicker and spend more time on what are you going to do here. I teach at I'm on the faculty of the West Texas Kodai Association. So I was coming here every summer and 2 weeks, and there's conducting in there. And I quickly realized what they needed. And so I took that curriculum that I planned, kind of a refresher in conducting, and I threw it out of the window. I don't care what your pattern. As a matter of fact, I told them, I said, you can't do patterns today. You're not allowed to. I better not see one downbeat. Yeah, right. So it was so much. When they left, I got emails about how much it made them think now when they picked up a piece of music for their students about an artistic choice rather than. Yeah.
I always say to my young conductors, conduct the music. Don't conduct the pattern. Forget the pattern. Learn it, know it, but then break those rules and be artistic with it. Just as you're saying, conduct the music.
It's a balance, because some type A, students I've had, when I say this, they're like, but, and I said, well, you're there to hold everything together.
That's right. Yeah.
And I said, if you're being artistic and you're out of the pattern, and then something happens, you better get back in it. And and that's happened to me on numerous occasions.
You're right. Different sides of the spectrum, depending on what they need. That's right. Yep. Excellent. Well, with singers that are going to be coming to this honor choir from different schools and regions, how do you build cohesion and ensemble sound in such a short rehearsal time?
I am big on the listening aspect in rehearsal. I know we all believe that that's important, and I tend to try to use that to address balance and blend without saying balance and blend. We've done here at Estacado for the last 2 weeks. All we've done is focus on listening to each other and trying to discern what we're hearing and making valued judgments on it. And so I try to do that within the warm-ups. And I'm just used to, going bell to bell in high school. When I taught, it was the bell rang, let's go. And when the bell was over, and they're not. And I think that's not just these kids, but that's the nature of school these days. I didn't know what all went on in high school anymore. Good Lord. And so trying to build those things, I think, has to come with more repetition of that idea. And so I try to incorporate that in the warm-ups. I do my own warm-ups in these honor choir situations. I start off doing certain warm-ups, and then as literature and things develop, by the second rehearsal, the first day, I figured out some things that I want change, and then I'll try to address those in the warm-up, or especially in the literature if it's in a specific place. If they're super prepared and we can really start digging into the music, then that's when the idea of community comes. Because I always have a set of questions about each piece that are, what they should know, and then how they think about it. How does it revolve around them? And that's you can build in community in a lot of ways. You can build it through games, which I don't do because we don't have time for games. And I mean, I did it for years when I did retreats. But in this situation, trying to get them to speak collaboratively. And I always tell them, I said, you're in a choir right now where you don't have to be the sole responsible tenor. When your high school choir director looks up and says, tenors, and she's looking right at you every day for every note. And you're like, oh my God, there's 8 of us up here. And you're the better one and all that. But now you're in a room full of everybody like you. And unfortunately, research says that when you have that kind of strength, then people do less. So you got to be able to motivate them. And I talk about my story and my journey, of losing my arm, because I know they're always curious, but I never start off telling them, about it. But I want to build that rapport with them first, through just my interactions. I've got to find new jokes that are more relevant, because the only people who laugh at my jokes are Christy at the piano and maybe another adult, someone over 40. And then everybody's like, what? Like, I'm wasting good material on y'all. But so I think you can do that, especially if you are someone who makes those quick decisions. You can be flexible, I should say, that you don't go in and say, we got to do this at this time, and be able to read the room. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love what you said about community, communication, collaboration, and making all that come together past the musical aspects. I think those are important aspects of why people come to these honor choirs, is they're looking for those experiences above and beyond what they have in their normal school choirs.
That's
So
right.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a friend who is also missing an arm, and his joke from birth he has, and
Mhm.
his joke is always, little kids come up and ask him, and he's like, "Oh, a shark bit it off," or a gator, snapped at me. I was in Florida traveling, and so they're like all
Oh,
shocked, and yeah.
well, the
So
poor
new things
parents,
for your arsenal there if you haven't used those already.
the poor parents are mortified.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
it happens to me all the time still. I'm in an airport, a little kid will come over. And, with kids, I just think this is just so great. Little kids will walk right up to me and say, what happened to your arm? Or where's your arm? Like I have it in my
Right,
pocket or something.
right, right,
And,
right.
and then I'll engage with them. And the parents are like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, well, but you've been staring at me for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I'm saying? You've been
yeah.
doing
Just if
looking.
you yeah, if you
Yeah,
want to stare, just come
and
ask.
I tell you, those kids, they ask the question, you answer it, and they're done with you. They're
Right.
a person in that. So it's not a big deal to them. But
Yeah, they're the
yeah,
most authentic people. Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
right. As we get older, we beat the authenticity and the creativity out of us, and we become this thing that doesn't bode well for arts or
Yeah,
humanity, really, in the long run.
yeah,
So
that's right. That's
yeah,
right.
we can learn a lot from little kids.
Absolutely. What can you tell these young singers that are coming to audition for this honor choir to expect the first rehearsal should they make it into the choir?
They can expect me to be like on fire, because that's how I operate. The kids here at Staccato, they don't know what to do with me, because I go in this same way every day, and they're like, how do you have some? I said, how do you not have energy? And they just look at me like this. I'm like, okay, now go back to, did you hear that? And I am working my tail off for those 50 minutes. And I have an assistant, and she comes in, she goes, oh my God, you were so great. I said, they weren't, they just look at me like, they look at me like, what are you doing? And I get that. And I know it takes time. I know that. I know that. I've said that. And my friend Christy, I was telling her, she said, you're giving those kids get an all-state, they get an all-state every day in your room. I said, I guess so. So I think they can expect for it to be a place where they're not afraid to share their thoughts on the music, where they can be bold and have input about what's happening or what should happen. Because again, it is something, it's an opportunity in that room and that room only, to make those decisions. Lin-Manuel said the best, I want to be in the room where it happens, and that's a change of class. If you hear that music in the background, that's what they play. We don't have bells. This is what they play.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, that's great. And bless you for your excitement, enthusiasm that you bring every day to the classroom. And I know that you're going to bring to the honor choir. I've seen you work a little bit in honor choirs, and I know they're in for a great treat. Gary, we got to wrap up here, and want to respect your time as well. So tell everybody listening kind of, if they want to follow you online or get in contact with you, what's the best way they can do that?
They can email me. At the easiest email is garypackwood@me.com. I am on social media, mostly on Facebook. When I say mostly on Facebook, I think some students set up my other accounts at some point. So sometimes I get this little thing that takes me to Instagram, but I don't really know how to work it. But an email is the best way, or I check Facebook once every week or 2 weeks, just because I don't have time, and I'm not anti-Facebook, but I don't have the time like I had in the past, and I choose to do other things with my time too. So they
for sure.
Any of those ways to reach me, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dr. Packwood, for joining me on the pod, and we look forward to having you in Albuquerque, and I know it's going to be a great honor choir experience for these kids.
Thanks so much. I'm really, really excited. Can't wait, Jeff. Take care.
You too.